So you want to be a dungeon master. Maybe you're a longtime player, looking to replace the position of your last DM. Maybe you've never played D&D before, but neither have any of your friends, and now you're looking to take the reins for yourself. In this video, we're going to discuss what a dungeon master actually does, whether or not you're ready to be a DM, and what resources you're gonna need. The dungeon master is another player at the table during a game of Dungeons & Dragons. Now, that statement was either blaringly obvious or very confusing, depending on your experience with the game. Which is why I want to make that clear. The Dungeon Master is another player, just like all the other players. Sure, they are playing the game differently, but the DM has just as much of an equal right to fun as everyone else at the table. If you're ever DMing and you feel like it's a chore, or you're not having fun, or you just don't want to play, you'll need to ask yourself why. Because the role of the DM is to make the fun. Not just the fun for the other players, but you have to make sure you're making the fun for yourself as well. If it's not fun for you, well, take a break for a week or just stop doing it. This is our hobby. It's not our job, and you shouldn't feel like it's a job. Now you're probably asking, mechanically, what does a Dungeon Master do? Well, a Dungeon Master is a person who controls the world the game takes place in. The other players control their characters who explore, interact, and alter the world you've made, and you control everything that isn't the player characters. Unless they have familiars, because they'll control those familiars as well. Oh, and if they have summon spells, they control their summons as well. You control most everything that isn't the player characters. This means you have to play the game differently than the players will. The players are usually playing to win, and they are trying to go into every fight to win without losing anyone. Sometimes they will lose, and sometimes player characters will die, but they will do anything in their character's arsenal to win, and frankly, don't care whether or not the fight is close. In fact, if they can find a way to make the fight way easier, they will take it basically every time. The DM, on the other hand, can't do that. The players are held back by their abilities and the magic items that you give them. If you try to win every fight, it'd be a breeze. Just throw a Tarrasque and 3 ancient dragons of your favorite Gatorade flavors, and there you go, you win every time. Which means you have to look at the game in a totally different way. Your goal is not to win. It is not to defeat the party. It is to tell a good story and to have a good time. As a DM, as long as you're capable of giving your players a good time, that's all that really matters. This means basically any question that you might have about D&D can be answered by do what's fun for you, do what's fun for your players, and communicate to them to figure out what that is. Any D&D advice that you get is just going to be someone explaining to you what they find fun at the table and what everyone else finds fun at their own table. This includes all the advice I'm gonna give. So if I say DMs go right and you find going left is a more fun way to DM for you and your friends, then do it. Oftentimes when I'm playing in my games and I'm throwing a hard encounter at my party and it gets down to a really tough roll, whether or not the player is going to go unconscious or even die, I'm feeling the tension for the party because I'm rooting for the party with them. Sure, I'm putting these obstacles in the way that put their lives at risk, but I don't want to see them lose. I want to see them defeat the odds and surpass and win. But I have to make sure that they earn that through very tough encounters and sometimes just getting lucky on the dice rolls. So what does it actually take to become a dungeon master? Do you need to be mentored by a senior DM who teaches you the wise ways of playing the game? Do you need hundreds of hours of player experience over multiple different characters and campaigns? Sure, the experience with the game will make your life easier, and having someone who can give you advice between games is also helpful, but it's not necessary. Remember, at some point, someone must have picked up the player's handbook or the starter set for the first time without having any idea what D&D or what TTRPGs are and ran a game just on those resources. Since actual play podcasts have come into existence, a lot more players and DMs get the opportunity to see what a game can look like before playing, but this wasn't always the case. Many people became DMs without having ever seen someone else DM. If you have a group of friends who are willing to let you run a D&D game for you, then you are already ready to become a dungeon master. Yes, you're gonna get the rules wrong. You will make mistakes. You might even do something worth putting on an RPG horror story subreddit. But that's all fine. DMing is a skill that with enough time, patience, and practice, you're gonna get good at. But even with all this, I haven't told you what you need to DM. You must need something, right? Well, everyone has different amounts of preparation that they need, and most importantly, everyone has different budgets. So I'm going to go from what's in my opinion most important to least important to start DMing. The basic rules, which can be found for free on D&D Beyond and elsewhere, is the bare minimum that you need to run a game of D&D. It contains all the basic mechanical rules, what the players will need to create their characters, and some very low-level monster blocks. These are mostly meant for the players, but if you're playing on a $0 budget, that's all you need. You can also find many fan-created resources online for more than you might need as a DM. A digital dice roller can also be found online, or you can use D&D Beyond for that as well, also free. If you're playing an in-person game, then physical dice is preferred, and you can find some pretty cool ones for cheap at your local gaming store or even some bookstores. Now, if you have some money laying around, I'd recommend dropping it into either the starter set or the Essentials kit. This includes the basic rules, but it also comes with a DM screen, some dice, and a pre-made adventure that really makes prepping a game a lot easier. Plus, using a pre-made adventure can teach you what a D&D campaign might look like. The starter set includes the adventure Lost Mines in Phandelver, which is a more classic D&D adventure. Not much to say other than lots of people love it, and it's recommended as a first-time DM's adventure for a reason. The Essentials kit includes Dragons of Icespire Peak, which is a much more open-ended adventure for players, where they get to choose the quests that they go on. I've run this adventure multiple times, and I can say this is really fun to bring a new group into. Each quest has a lot of choices for the players to make, and multiple ways that the party can succeed or fail written into the quest. The only thing I'd recommend is to make your party choose the next quest they're going to do at the end of the session before they go do it. This way, you have more time to prepare these adventures as much as you want. If you have more extra cash and you're looking for books, the next I recommend is the Player's Handbook. It gives your party more character options, it is the complete text of standard D&D rules, and is basically a requirement that someone has a Player's Handbook at the table, and it isn't a terrible idea for that person to be the Dungeon Master. It is also worth pointing out that the book that I reference the most during my games is the Player's Handbook. Now, you might be surprised to see that the Dungeon Master's Guide is so low on this list, considering that it's supposed to be the book for, well, Dungeon Masters. Well, I've found in my experience that the DMG can actually be more harmful to starting DMs than useful. It's better used by a DM who already has a group and a campaign that they're running. This is because of the way that the DMG is ordered. The DMG starts by asking the DM to build whole cities, towns, and multiverses before actually getting to work on running a session. This is a terrible way to get people into the hobby because from my experience, the potential DMs tend to get very focused on the world building that they lose focus on what actually matters. Playing the game. I'd like to expand on this in a future video. Just know that when running your first sessions, you'll never know if it's only going to be one session or if it's only going to be 2, 3, or 4 sessions. Instead of creating cities and characters that the players might not meet for another 10 to 15 sessions, focus on building session 1. And don't even think about session 2 until session 1 is done. The most important thing is to start small and build as you need to. If you are at the point where you need to be building multiple cities or different universes, then those parts of the book can be useful. But it's the fact that it's the first part of the book, it sets the players up with the wrong expectations. It also has a lot of different rulings on different things you might have happen in an adventure, but pretty much every ruling in here is considered an optional rule, even with multiple different options on occasion, so you don't need to follow anything that's in this book if you don't like it, or if you have an idea that just fits how your game plays better. The DMG also has lots of different magic items and magic item tables that can be useful to DMs for, well, magic items, because there's no magic items in the Player's Handbook. There are some in the adventures, but if you want more, you're gonna have to go here. Really, the short of it is that the DMG is good for long-term campaigns. But if you're starting out for your first time running as a DM, you're not doing a long game yet. Maybe by session 5, 6, or 7, you're going to want to consider this, but up until that point, I would just steer clear because it tends to give DMs the wrong impression. I really wasn't sure if the monster manual should go before or after the DMG, but considering the monster manual is only useful if you're building your own homebrew adventure, and if you are building a homebrew adventure, you're probably going to want the DMG as well. So I figured this can go last. It's pretty simple. It's just a book full of monster stat blocks and monster lore. I don't got much else to say about it, other than it can be fun to go through this, scanning the pages for inspiration for your next adventure. And finally, while 5e has many other books at your disposal, these are all expansions on existing content. Maybe you don't want to fight dragons, but would rather take your players on an adventure where they fight vampires. Well then, you might want to look at the adventure book Curse of Strahd. Maybe you want to add a bunch more dragons into your game. Well, the source book Fizban's Treasury of Dragons has a lot of resources that you can add to your own games. If you want any particular recommendations, the book Xanathar's Guide to Everything is basically considered a main source book to many players. It includes many more player options, but a ton of DM resources that you can use to create NPCs or random encounters or more common magic items. The other book I'd recommend is Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. It adds optional rules to the game that are basically core rules to everyone I play with, and that book also has more resources for DMs. Alright, so you have everything that you need to start DMing, but before you can play, you might want to consider running a Session 0. What's a Session 0? Well, that's going to be the next video in this series. Or I guess you can just Google it if you don't want to wait a week to find out. I assume you don't want to wait. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. If you liked it and want to see more like it, click that subscribe button to see more videos like it. Thank you for watching, and this is the end of the video. Bye.